It's been 5 years and I'd almost forgotten what it meant to live for myself. Ever since Luis passed, my life has been on mute. No applause, no laughter, just the sound of kids' footsteps in the morning, the rumble of the washing machine, and late at night, the quiet splash of dishwater as I stood alone in the kitchen. Luis left quickly. From diagnosis to goodbye, it was only 8 months. During that time I felt hollowed out, telling everyone things would be fine, still making soups, delivering pills, checking insurance policies. But deep down I knew. Our story was nearing its final page. In the hospital he looked like a shadow of himself. Thin, fading. The doctor gently told me to prepare myself. But when Luis reached out, took my hand and said, "Lena, promise me you'll still live a full life after I'm gone," I broke down. "Don't talk nonsense," I whispered, my lips close to his ear. "You still have to bake Olivia's birthday cake next year." He smiled, soft, gentle eyes holding mine. "Then promise me, Lena. Take care of the kids, yes, but take care of you too. Will you?" I nodded. But I didn't really keep that promise. For the first 2 years after he passed, I couldn't even begin to think about living fully. Every day I was up at 5:30 making breakfast, getting the kids to school, then rushing to my job as an assistant at the town's community dental clinic. Leftovers for lunch, then back to pick them up, help with homework, cook dinner, do laundry, tuck them in. After they fell asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table sorting bills, insurance forms, legal paperwork Luis had left behind. Life felt like it was trapped in a sealed glass jar. No emotion could get in or out. Joy, anger, sorrow. It all stopped mattering. As long as my 2 kids were healthy and safe, that was enough for me. Dan is 7 now, in elementary school. He dresses himself in the mornings, ties his shoes, even pours me a glass of milk. Olivia is 10, quiet and thoughtful, always sketching. For my birthday last year, she saved her allowance to buy a hand-drawn card. They know their dad is gone. They know mom is tired. They never whine, never complain. And that breaks me in a way. I'm grateful. And guilty. And sometimes I just want to cry. Some nights I sit alone in the backyard under the moonlight. The neighbor's dog barks. A distant train whistles. I hold Luis's old mug in my hands, tea long cold. And I think maybe this is it. No more surprises. No more romance. No second acts. Until that day when my friend Jennifer dragged me to her family's barbecue. "You've been off the grid too long," she said, grabbing steaks from a supermarket freezer. "Lena, you can't keep going like this. You need to talk to actual people, not parents, not patients, not your kids." "I'm not good at talking," I said with a soft laugh, taking corn from her hands. "Especially with strangers." She rolled her eyes. "You don't have to talk. You just need one night. Music, a hot dog, some laughs, even if they're not yours. Just sit there. The sky won't fall." So I went. I wore an old but clean denim shirt and tied my hair in a ponytail. Olivia and Dan came too. They chased other kids through the backyard, their faces lit up with pure, unfiltered joy. I sat in a corner, watching the crowd gather around the grill, laughing, teasing, while country music floated in the air. And for a moment, everything felt unreal. This isn't my world anymore, I thought. I've been away from this kind of life for too long. Just then, a man walked over and handed me a glass of lemonade. "I'm guessing you're Olivia and Dan's mom," he said, his voice gentle. His smile wasn't pushy or overly charming, just warm. "I am," I replied, nodding a little awkwardly. "I'm Dennis. Jennifer's distant cousin," he said, gesturing toward the grill. "She told me to come over and say hi." I couldn't help but laugh. "She's very enthusiastic. She said you're incredible." I figured I had to meet the kind of superhero who's raising 2 amazing kids. I nearly laughed out loud. "Are you complimenting me or teasing me?" "Both," he said, lifting his glass. "I just played dodgeball with Dan. That little guy nearly knocked me over." "He has no sense of moderation," I said, shaking my head, my voice laced with that unconscious softness moms tend to have. "He's great," Dennis said. "Kids like that grow up that way because someone's doing a lot of things right." For a moment I felt something stir inside me. In the 5 years since Luis died, no one had said something like that to me so plainly. Family and friends often tiptoed around, afraid of triggering my grief, avoiding too much talk. But the truth was, beyond being a mom, a widow, a survival machine, I'd been longing for someone to say, "You've done great. You've worked so hard." That night I didn't say much. Just chatted with him a bit. But when he asked for my number before he left, I didn't say no. I told myself I was just being polite. Still, deep down, something shifted. I don't remember the exact day we became something more. For a while, Dennis kept showing up just as a friend. He'd send the occasional message, "Have you eaten?" Or comment under a photo I posted of Dan at a soccer game. He's turning into quite the little man. Then came the small visits. Once a week maybe. Sometimes he'd bring a bunch of carnations, a bottle of budget wine, or a pack of Dan's favorite peanut butter cookies. The kids adored him, especially Dan. Boys tend to crave a father figure, and Dennis somehow stepped into that space Luis had left behind. He'd take Dan to the park on weekends, help Olivia build wooden frames for science projects, even sat with them making construction paper turkeys the week before Thanksgiving. I remember one night after dinner the kids were in the living room playing a word game with him, laughing so hard their faces turned red. I leaned against the kitchen doorway just watching them, smiling without realizing it. And in that moment for the first time I thought, maybe I could have a home again. So when Dennis eventually said, "What if we try living together for a bit?" I didn't immediately say no. "Are you sure?" I asked, standing out on the balcony, unsure. My life isn't easy. This isn't one of those come hang out for a week and leave kind of setups. "I know," he said, stepping forward and setting his glass on the railing. "Lena, I'm not playing around. I love you and I love those two kids." I looked at him for a moment. The night wind was messing up his hair. He didn't look like a man who would lie. "1 month," I said. "You get 1 month. You understand, I can't have the kids getting hurt." "I swear. They won't," he said. He showed up on move-in day with 3 big boxes and a toolkit. I noticed the bathroom faucets leaking a little. "I could fix it." He said it casually, like he didn't want me to feel like I needed him. And I won't deny, he did help. He fixed the loose drawer rails in the kitchen, leveled the wobbly leg of the living room couch with a new wood block, stayed up late fixing Dan's broken scooter. The kids thought he could do anything. Dan started calling him D-Man. Olivia began bringing him water without being asked. I did wonder if it was all too fast. But coming home to someone who helped, who sat down to eat with us, who talked and laughed and did homework with the kids. That feeling of not being at war alone. It pulled me in. And then closer still. One evening he made steak and roasted mushrooms. We had dinner in the backyard. When he raised his glass he said, "Thanks for letting me be part of this family." I smiled, a little embarrassed, but in my chest bloomed a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Then that same night he said something for the first time. "You always look exhausted," he said. "Is it because of the kids? Maybe you're being too hard on yourself? Don't take it the wrong way, I just think maybe they need to learn some independence too." I put down my knife and fork and looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean you don't have to micromanage every little thing," he said, pausing to smile. "You're a woman too, not just a mom." There was nothing technically wrong with what he said. In fact, it almost sounded thoughtful. But something in me tensed. I smiled faintly, said nothing, and went back to cutting my steak. A few days later he tested the waters again. We were watching TV together. He had his arm around me, his fingers gently tracing the back of my hand. "Have you ever thought about, if we got married maybe we could have a child of our own?" I froze. "Dennis, I already have 2 children," I said calmly. "They are my whole world. And I need to be honest with you, I'm not planning to have another." He paused, then quickly laughed it off like it was nothing. "Of course, just a passing thought. Don't worry, I totally get it." I nodded. But something had shifted. A quiet chord inside me had been struck. Not long after, Olivia came to me and asked if she could switch back to her old nightlight. "It just feels different in the house now," she said. I asked her why. She shook her head. "It's nothing. I just feel weird." I didn't press her. But that night, for the first time when I listened to my kids talk, I started to run Dennis's reactions through my head too. He hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, it seemed like he was doing everything right. And that, in itself, became the problem. How was it possible for someone to get everything right while trying to blend into an existing family? No stumbles, no awkward fits, no missed cues? My instincts told me something was subtly off. Not enough to point a finger, but enough to feel like a door had been left slightly ajar. One good gust of wind and it'd swing wide open. Some truths don't crash in with a bang. They leak out little by little through the details of daily life. Like the time Dan was playing with his building blocks and Dennis walked in and nearly tripped on one. Didn't anyone ever teach you to clean up after yourself? His voice snapped, sharp enough to make me freeze in the hallway. Dan lowered his head, lips parting slightly but said nothing. Just as I stepped in to defuse the tension, Dennis suddenly broke into a grin. Hey buddy, it's all good. Just didn't want to faceplant, that's all. That smile came too fast. Like a switch flipped. Something about that kind of emotional toggle unnerved me. Dan quietly started picking up the blocks. I crouched beside him to help and he whispered. He sounded like a drill sergeant. I patted his back. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Then there were the rules. Rules we'd never had before. No TV after dinner. Go back to your rooms. You two need to start walking yourselves to school. Your mom and I aren't chauffeurs. At first I thought he was just trying to help. Being responsible. But slowly I noticed a change. The kids got quieter. They hesitated before speaking when Dennis was around, glancing at me first like they were checking if it was safe. The unease in my chest kept growing. Then one afternoon, Dennis brought up his sister May. She's not doing too well lately, he said. Tension with my mom, some acting out. I thought maybe she could stay with us for a few days. Change of scenery. I hesitated. May was 30. Right in the middle of that emotionally volatile age. Our home had only just found some stability. Olivia had finally warmed up to Dennis and I didn't want to disrupt that balance. Selfishly, I wanted to shield my kids from more upheaval. It's just for a few days, Dennis said lightly. Didn't you always say home is about making space for each other? I gave in reluctantly and nodded. May arrived with 2 suitcases, a phone and a perpetual eye roll. Her first words were, I thought your house would be bigger. I smiled and welcomed her in, told her she'd be sharing a room with Olivia. She frowned. You don't have a guest room? Olivia stood quietly by the doorway and murmured, I can give her my bed. I couldn't explain why, but a chill ran through me. The first couple of days were calm enough. May mostly stayed in the bedroom, glued to her phone. She barely spoke during dinner. Dennis doted on her, always reaching across the table to pile food on her plate, saying, She's been overlooked too long at home. I tried to keep things balanced. But of course that never lasts. That afternoon I came home from work and immediately sensed something was off. Dan stood in the corner of the living room, eyes red and watery. May was on the couch, beside her cracked game console. It was him, she shouted, pointing at Dan. I told him over and over not to touch my stuff and he still did. He broke my switch. I turned to Dan. He was biting his lip, tears pooling in his eyes. I didn't touch it, he whispered. I just walked by, maybe it fell on its own. So now I'm lying? May snapped, shooting up from the couch, her voice sharp enough to cut. That's when Dennis walked in, taking in the scene with a frown. What's going on? May ran to him. He broke my game and then said I did it myself. I tried to keep things from escalating. Let's all calm down, May. You're biased, she burst into tears. You don't even care whose fault it is. You're just protecting your own kid. Dennis looked at me then, his voice suddenly colder. Lena, you can't keep assuming your kids are always innocent. It felt like a slap across the face. I stood there, stunned, the weight of humiliation crawling up my spine. That night, I grounded Dan from using his tablet. Olivia sat through dinner without saying a word. Later, alone in the living room, I picked up the damaged console. The crack wasn't on the edge, it split through the center. A clean, forceful break like it had been slammed down hard. I wasn't stupid. I just didn't want it to be true. The next morning, Olivia came into the kitchen quietly. Mom, she said, May broke it herself yesterday. I saw it. She was on a video call with her friend and it slipped from her hand. Then she blamed Dan. I stared at her, silent. Why didn't you say something yesterday? She looked down. I was scared you wouldn't believe me either. My chest cracked open in that moment. Dennis was in the kitchen changing the coffee filter, unaware. I stood in the hallway watching him, this man I had once believed I could trust. And now, somehow he had created a space where my daughter was afraid of my love. Then May walked in. And I said it. I think it's time for you to go home. She froze, then scoffed, rolling her eyes so hard I could practically hear it. You really think you matter that much? You think my brother actually loves you? Please. He just likes how easy you are to manipulate. The air went stone cold. Dennis's voice shot out from the hallway. panicked and harsh. May. Shut your mouth. I didn't look at him. I just grabbed Dan's backpack, took his hand and said, "Come on, let's get you to school." His little fingers curled around mine just barely, but firmly. And I knew in that moment he felt it. His mom was back. But not all the way. Not yet. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, May's voice playing on a loop in my mind. "You think he loves you? He thinks you're stupid. Easy." Dennis didn't bring her up again. He made a token comment, "She's just a kid," then went about his evening taking a shower, turning in early, pretending nothing had fractured. He wanted to believe the surface was intact. But I could hear the house creaking around us, like the foundation was shifting beneath our feet. And I was still sitting on the couch, pretending I didn't feel the floor give. Around 11 I heard footsteps upstairs. Soft, careful, like someone was trying not to be heard. I threw on a sweater and went up. Olivia's door was slightly ajar. She was still awake, sitting on her bed, clutching her worn-out blue bunny by its torn ear. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "why aren't you asleep?" She startled, wiping at her eyes quickly. "I'm okay." I stepped inside and sat beside her. The room was chilly. She pulled the blanket a little toward me like a small offering. "Are you worried about Dan?" She nodded, then shook her head. "Are you worried about me?" Pause. Then a tiny voice, "A little." I wrapped my arms around her. Her shoulders were stiff, hesitant, like she didn't know if she could still trust that embrace. "You don't talk to us like before," she finally said, her voice fragile and testing. "When Dan falls, you don't scoop him up right away. You look at Dennis first." A tight knot formed in my chest. Are we too much trouble now?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Do you like Dennis and his sister more than us?" She paused, then added, "Are you gonna want your own baby with him instead?" My heart dropped like an anchor. I wrapped my arms around her almost instantly. "No, sweetheart. Absolutely not. Listen to mommy, okay?" She didn't move, but her breathing was trembling, uneven. "You know how much I love you and Dan, right?" I said softly. "From the moment you were born, I knew. Nothing in this world mattered more than protecting you too. But sometimes, adults make mistakes. Especially when we want so badly to believe in someone. When we're scared to carry everything alone again." I paused, trying to steady my own emotions. I got scared too. I was afraid of losing what I had, afraid of being alone again. So I stopped seeing things clearly. But what you said tonight, it was like a bell ringing in my head. It woke me up. Her shoulders began to soften. Kept going. "Believe me, baby, you and Dan have never been a burden. Never. You two are the reason I know I'm still worth loving. Still worth being here. Without you, I wouldn't have made it this far." She finally looked up at me. There were tears in her eyes, but a kind of strength too. More than I expected. "I love you, mommy," she whispered. "I don't want to be your before kid." I pulled her in tighter. "You'll never be my before. You're my right now. My most important now. And my future." We stayed like that for a while. The room was so quiet, we could hear the wind rustling the leaves outside the window. Then she asked, almost inaudibly, "Is Dennis going to leave?" I didn't answer. But in that moment the truth became clear to me. I couldn't keep dragging us through this blurred version of a family. My children, through the quietest signals, had been begging me for help. And finally I was listening. Luis's dying wish for me to live a beautiful life wasn't about finding another man. It was about having the courage to walk away when things turned dark again. That night I slept beside Olivia in her bed. Her hand held onto mine the whole night. And I didn't let go. Because I knew I had finally found the direction that truly belonged to me. For 5 years I thought being a single mother had taught me to be careful. Guarded. But the truth doesn't always show itself through suspicion. Sometimes, it reveals itself in a single accidental moment. One you're never ready for. It was a regular Tuesday. I had just dropped the kids off at school and came home to catch up on bills. I wanted to check our joint bank account. Dennis had been mentioning the wedding budget more often lately, even said his credit card got temporarily frozen and needed me to cover a few things. "Don't worry," he said. "It's just a new card. Just easier if you handle some of the wedding stuff for now. I'll pay you back." It sounded reasonable. And I almost believed him. I logged into the account. At first glance the charges looked normal. Restaurants, gas stations, a grocery run or two. But then I noticed a few unfamiliar locations. One stood out, a large purchase at a men's boutique downtown. The same day he told me he'd stayed home fixing a door lock. I opened my email trying to find a receipt or confirmation. But Dennis used a separate private email. He rarely shared it with me. On a strange impulse I couldn't explain, I grabbed the shared iPad and tried logging into the Chrome account saved on his old device. The password still worked. The browser and messaging apps were still active. The moment I clicked into the message thread, a chill ran down my spine. The chat was with someone named Ricky. Dennis had sent him a photo of me and the kids in our backyard, captioned, "2 pieces of baggage but she's decent. Nice house too." Ricky replied with a laughing crying emoji. "Damn bro, you already moved in?" Dennis answered, "What choice do I have? These days finding a woman with a house and no clue is rare." I sat at the kitchen table, one hand clutching my coffee cup so hard my knuckles turned white. The clock on the wall ticked softly in the background. But in my head just static. It wasn't shock. It was nausea. I closed the laptop slowly. Let out a breath. Not yet. It wasn't time, not yet. I needed more. Real proof. Enough to shut the door on him forever. For me and for my children. Dennis hadn't come home yet. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just waited. And like always he came through the door whistling, a takeout bag in hand. "Hey, got your favorite fried rice," he said cheerfully, holding up the bag. Line was actually short tonight. "Where were you today?" I asked, watching him closely. He shrugged and smiled. "Just walked around. Picked up a few things. Got some air." "Why?" I slid the bank statement toward him. "So you just happened to buy a tailored suit while breathing fresh air? And booked a $200 bottle of wine, also while walking around, on my card?" He froze for a couple of seconds and the smile drained right off his face. "You went through my account?" "It's my money in that account," I said slowly. "You've been spending it a lot more freely than I imagined." "Lena, I'll admit it, I've been under some pressure. I didn't want you to look down on me." "So you chose to lie?" I pressed. Dennis scrambled, forcing on that polished smile of his. "I just hadn't found the right time to explain. You know I'm not a bad guy, Lena." Right then we heard the front door open. Olivia stepped in, clutching her art board from school, her eyes flicking from him to me, uneasy. I glanced at Dennis and lowered my voice. "I don't want to argue in front of the kids." He clenched his jaw and walked into the living room without another word. That night we all sat down for dinner. Dennis acted like it was any ordinary evening. He played chess with Dan. He fixed the zipper on Olivia's pencil case. He was back to playing the part of the perfect stepdad. I just watched, quiet, letting him perform. But in my heart I knew the truth. He wasn't a part of this family. He never had been. When the house fell quiet and the kids were asleep, I returned to the kitchen table. I saved screenshots of his chats, bank charges, and email receipts into a locked folder. Organized them like a case file. Then I picked up the phone and called Rachel, my best friend, the one who warned me that Dennis seemed a little too perfect. "I need a lawyer," I said. She didn't even hesitate. Finally. "I knew it. I just wanted to be sure," I replied. "He's good. Too good. He fooled me. He fooled my kids. What are you going to do?" I stared out the window at the lights flickering across the neighborhood. "I'm going to make him regret ever stepping into this house." There was a pause, then Rachel asked quietly, "When are you going to make your move?" I closed the laptop, voice steady. "When he thinks he's won." In the days that followed, Dennis carried on like nothing had changed. He still left early to meet clients. Still came home with little gas station snacks for the kids. Still offered to do the dishes. Still curled up next to me at night like the perfect partner. He didn't know I was recording everything. Videos, screenshots, all of it. I didn't tell the kids. But they knew something was different. Especially Olivia. She clung closer at mealtimes. She whispered, "Are you okay today, Mom?" And I'd smile and say, "I'm okay, sweetheart. Mommy's always okay." Then came the turning point. One quiet afternoon I was sitting in the backyard sorting paperwork. Dennis poked his head out from the kitchen. "Got a minute? We need to talk wedding details." I closed the folder and nodded. He brought out a few pages of handwritten notes, sat across from me like a man with a plan. "I talked to my mom," he began. "She'd really prefer the venue to be something simple. You know, an outdoor chapel or garden type of thing. I nodded along, poured us both some water, played the part of the cooperative fiancé. When he brought up the budget, he was back in his element. Of course, I'll handle my share, he said. But given your situation, you own the house, great credit, no major debts. It probably makes sense for you to front the initial costs. We'll settle up later. I smiled sweetly. Sure, I'll plan for that. He visibly relaxed, even leaned in to kiss my forehead. I knew I could count on you. Then he said it. But there's something else I need to talk to you about. I looked up, letting the silence invite him forward. He hesitated for a beat, then said slowly, I'd prefer if your kids didn't attend the wedding. And there was. The whole act cracked open like thin ice under a boot. I didn't say a word. Just lowered my glass. He seemed unsure if I'd understood. To be clear, I'm not saying I don't like them. They're great. But that day, it's important to me. I want it to be just about us. So I said nothing. Just kept looking at him. You get it, right? I mean, technically they're not my responsibility. And my mom's going to be there. She might think it's awkward. I nodded slowly and replied, voice calm as silk. You mean to say you don't want my children at their own mother's wedding? He must have sensed the shift in air pressure. His tone turned soft, almost pleading. Lena, don't take it the wrong way. It's not that I don't like them, I just... Do you know what I'm thinking right now? I cut in gently, my voice almost kind. I'm thinking, if Luis were still alive to hear that, he'd beat you so hard you'd end up in the ear. He froze, blood draining from his face. I stood up slowly and pushed my chair in. Don't worry, Dennis, I said, smile sharp. I promise, they won't be at the wedding. His eyes lit up with relief. Really? You'd agree? I cut him off. Because there is no wedding with you anymore. His mouth hung open, gasping like a fish out of water. Then he shouted, voice rising with panic. Lena, are you insane? Do you know how much I've done for this family? I left my job, I helped raise your kids, and my mother hasn't even met you yet. You're right, your mom never met me. That's probably the luckiest thing that ever happened to her. I walked into the kitchen, pulled his key off the hook in the little wicker basket and tossed it onto the table in front of him. You're moving out today. Don't worry, I won't cause a scene and I won't rip things apart in front of the kids. You said you didn't want them at the wedding? You were right. There won't be them because there won't be you either. His face flushed red as he stepped toward me. You can't do this to me. I stared him down. Oh, I absolutely can. You forget this house. It's not ours. It's mine. His mouth opened like he wanted to curse, but something held him back. I turned, walked to the entryway and pulled a sealed envelope from the drawer. Tossed it in his hands. That's a breakdown of every dollar you've spent from my account over the last 2 months. Don't worry, I've backed up everything. Every receipt, every message. And yes, I've got a lawyer. The calmer you are, the simpler this stays. He stood frozen, the fire in his eyes quickly replaced by something far more useful, fear. I looked at him one last time. You thought you were getting an easy woman. What you didn't realize was, you walked straight into a mother wolf's den. You thought you were running the script, but I've been behind the curtain the whole time watching you rehearse. You can walk out now. Or I'll help you out. He stared at me for a long beat, then muttered psycho under his breath. Then he grabbed the cheap luggage he should have taken with him weeks ago and walked out the door. When it closed, I didn't cry. I just exhaled, quiet and steady, like I'd finally scraped something rotten out of my life. After Dennis left, the house was quiet again. But not the kind of silence that suffocates. This was clean, open silence, the kind with room to breathe. I changed the locks. Took down the hook where his key used to hang, tossed it in the trash with the cheap keychain he'd given me the day he moved in. A little metal smiley face engraved with, you and me. Now it just looked cold and bitterly ironic. I texted Rachel a single sentence. It's on. 3 days later, I sat in a conference room at her law office. I handed over the iPad and a thick manila folder filled with everything. Bank statements, email screenshots, chat logs, wire transfers, even the signed deposit contracts he'd paid with my account. Rachel flipped through the materials, a slow grin spreading across her face. God, I love how you organize. I was afraid dumping it all at once might seem too brutal, I said calmly. But I'm not leaving any back doors open. Good. She closed the folder. First, we'll issue a cease and desist. Freeze his access to any shared accounts. And with this evidence, emotional coercion, financial abuse, he won't be able to spin it. I nodded. No sense of triumph. Just a solid, grounded clarity. When I got home, Olivia was in the kitchen making cocoa for Dan. She looked up hesitant. Mom, he's really not coming back, is he? He's not, I said, dropping my bag and shrugging off my coat. I walked over and hugged her. We don't give second chances to people who show us who they are. She leaned into me and nodded softly. Dan came up beside us, hopeful. Can we go out today? It's sunny. Of course we can. I tousled his hair. Starting tomorrow we get to do all the things we always wanted to, but we're too scared to. I took them downtown to the botanical gardens. Dan ran around the fountains snapping photos with my phone. Olivia sat on a bench, sketching vines and tree branches in her notepad. On the drive home I rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair like it used to when I was younger. We haven't done this in forever, Olivia said. I know, I smiled, one hand on the wheel. It's time to start again. That night I packed the last of Dennis's things, 2 garbage bags full. I left them on the porch and texted him. Your stuff is outside. Please pick it up by noon tomorrow. By lunchtime the next day the bags were still there. Untouched. I didn't remind him. And he never came back. That afternoon I cleaned the entire house. Took down the curtains to wash them, pulled the couch covers off and hung them to dry on the balcony. The washing machine hummed steadily in the background as I sat down on the floor, and laughed. Not a joyful laugh, but the kind that comes from pure release. I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. Because I realized, I had never truly been alone. My kids were with me. My friends were with me. And most importantly, my instincts and judgment had always been there. I just buried them under fear. Now they were back. That evening, I sat in the living room and began sorting through old ledgers and the box of keepsakes Luis had left behind. Inside his old financial notebook, I found a small scrap of paper tucked between the pages. In his handwriting it read, "Don't be afraid to mess up. Be afraid of never starting over." I stared at that line for a long time. And then I understood. Dennis wasn't a disaster. He was a catalyst. A not too expensive reminder. A nudge to remember what trust should actually feel like. I closed the notebook and stood up. Walked toward the kids' room. The door was slightly ajar. Warm light spilled out. Olivia was reading. Dan had already fallen asleep. She looked up and said softly, "Mom, you're different now." "Oh." I smiled. "How so?" "You walk louder," she said seriously. "Before you used to walk like you were hiding. Now it's like, you're not scared anymore." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Then let's keep walking forward, together." Dennis thought the day he walked out of my house the story ended. He had no idea. That was only the final line of Act 1. On the 4th day after we sent the cease and desist letter, I received confirmation from the bank. Our joint account had been frozen. Every transaction would now be reviewed. Not a single dollar could move without my written consent. Rachel told me he was completely blindsided. "You want to guess his first reaction?" she asked on the phone, half laughing. "Let me guess, he played the victim?" "Worse. He yelled at my receptionist. Said it must be some big misunderstanding." I didn't laugh. I just nodded. "Good. That means the show's not over yet." I didn't go on social media to blast him. I didn't gossip to mutual friends or air dirty laundry in group chats. But I did feel, deeply, that the story needed to be told. So I logged into an old blog I hadn't updated in years. And I started writing. I used to think if someone helped carry your groceries, picked up your kids, said good night at the door, that it meant they deserved a place in your life. But sometimes people don't come to help. They come to drain you, your trust, your energy, even your name. I didn't name names. I didn't reveal every detail. I simply told the story from the voice of a single mom. How a good man crept into her life under the guise of love, slowly infiltrated, manipulated, and drained, until she finally saw it, stopped it, and reclaimed her life. Vital. I canceled the wedding, and the lie that came with it. I didn't expect the response. The next morning my inbox overflowed. Dozens, hundreds, of women. Most of them single moms. Writing things like, "I thought I kept choosing wrong because I wasn't smart enough. But reading your story, I know now it wasn't my fault." And, "Thank you for showing me that stopping the damage is an act of love." I'm choosing my kids too. Then came the one that chilled me. A stranger wrote. Was his name Dennis Smith? I met someone just like that 3 years ago. Moved into my house. Ate my food. Told me my kid was a burden. I stared at the message. Screenshotted it. Sent it to Rachel. Her reply came back fast and firm. That's enough for conspiracy to defraud. We're filing. We collected statements from 3 women. Submitted them to the district attorney's office as a joint claim. Emotional abuse and financial coercion. In our state, cases like this take time. But once they're in motion, they land hard. Online, the whispers turned to buzz. More people started connecting the dots. Eventually, Dennis's name surfaced. I said nothing. And I denied nothing. Because nothing I'd said was untrue. Finally, Dennis began to squirm. He sent me a long email, pages of it. Not one sorry. But 8 paragraphs about how he was now being harassed, had lost job offers, and was defamed online. His last line. I think you've taken this too far. What happened between us didn't need to be public. I sat there at my laptop, exhaled, and typed back 3 words. Served you right. I hadn't packed a travel bag in a long time. Not since Luis passed away. Back then we were planning a family hiking trip. Just the 4 of us, taking Dan and Olivia on an adventure. The itinerary had been taped to the fridge for weeks. But the day Luis got sick, I pulled it down. It never went back up. This time I taped a new one. A quiet seaside town, just a 3-hour drive from home. Not a tourist hotspot, just sand, an old wooden boardwalk, and a pine-lined road perfect for biking. When I told the kids, they could barely believe it. We're really going on a trip? Dan's eyes widened. Really? I said, smiling. No backpacks, no homework, for 3 whole days. Olivia stood at the end of the hall, uncertain. Are you sure, Mom? You're always busy. I'm busy making us happy now. I pulled them both into the room. And from today on, that's priority number 1. We didn't pack perfectly, but we packed with purpose. Olivia brought her watercolor set and sketchbook. Dan stuffed in 3 comic books and his tattered plush shark. We rented a little cabin near the beach. It wasn't fancy, wooden furniture, a bit worn, but when you open the windows you could hear the ocean. The moment I pushed the window open, Dan jumped up and yelled, "This is awesome." I watched him twirl around the room and something warm welled up in my chest. Not quite tears, just that feeling of finally exhaling. That afternoon we took a walk along the beach. Olivia collected seashells to glue onto her drawings. Dan built a sand fortress and insisted on naming it Team Jones Headquarters. We had dinner at a small diner in town, one of those old-school places with black and white photos of local fishermen on the walls. The waitress was a silver-haired woman in her 60s. He glanced at me, then at the kids, and smiled. You all look like a family out of a magazine. I thanked her but didn't offer more. We were a family. Not a traditional one maybe, but somehow, a more honest one. That evening we watched the sunset together. I sat on the steps outside the cabin. Dan fell asleep curled against me. Olivia leaned on my shoulder, one hand still sketching absent-mindedly. Mom, she whispered, are you not sad anymore? I looked down at her and smiled softly. I'm still sad sometimes, I said. But now I know how to live with it. She nodded, then leaned closer and whispered in my ear, You're the bravest mom I know. That night I took out the video Luis had recorded for the kids during his final weeks. We had planned to show it to them when they each turned 10. But I knew now was the moment. In the video, Luis wore his old sweater, sitting at our kitchen table. His voice was hoarse but steady. His eyes full of fire. Hey kids, if you're watching this, that means Mom thinks you're grown up enough now. So I'll keep it short. Life's tough, but you've got the best mom in the world. She'll protect you, but I need you to remember to protect her too. She won't always say when she's tired. But she gets lonely sometimes. He paused for a few seconds. Then smiled gently. Did she take you on a trip? Good. Then do me a favor. Pick up a stone from the beach, bring it home and put it on our windowsill. So it'll feel like I never really left. I paused the video and turned toward them. Olivia's eyes were red, but she blinked the tears away. Dan whispered, Can we find the stone tomorrow? Please. I nodded, pulling them both into my arms. Of course we can. That night the 3 of us slept deep and peaceful. The next morning we went to the beach. We found a smooth, round stone, gray-blue, with a little mark that looked like the mole between Luis's brows. When we got home, I washed it clean and placed it on the kitchen windowsill. And in the light that poured through that window, the stone looked like it still carried the wind. And the sound of his voice. After we came back from the trip, I gave myself what I called a long, slow recovery period. I didn't quit my job. I didn't go off the grid. I just started living differently. I began using my free time more intentionally. I volunteered at the local town library, and before long, someone recommended me to join a local support group for single moms. It was a Thursday night when I attended my first in-person meeting. The room wasn't large. Paper flowers handmade by someone's child decorated the walls. Around the long table sat 5 or 6 women, each holding a paper cup filled with coffee or tea. They all looked tired, but behind their fatigue was something else. A quiet determination to reclaim names over labels. I introduced myself. Hi, I'm Lena. I have 2 kids. I called off a wedding that nearly cost me them. There was a pause. Then came the nods. The soft chuckles. That quiet, unmistakable, I see you. We began swapping stories, not complaints but healing confessions. One woman spoke about fleeing an abusive home at 3 a.m. with her kids. Another had just ended a marriage where she felt like a full-time waitress instead of a partner. Someone else was still debating whether to leave the man who cared only in the form of commands. I shared my blog post, Olivia's home video, and the story of the stone on our kitchen windowsill. Some women cried. Some clapped. And for the first time, I wasn't the strong single mom in the room. I was just a woman, one who had walked through the storm and was now willing to speak. Weeks later, I started volunteering at the town's Little Arts Collective, helping coordinate a community project called The Echo Exhibit, a show featuring photography, stories, and voice recordings about family. Olivia contributed her picture book sketches. Dan helped me record the opening lines of the audio guide. You've become the local symbol of gentle armor, Rachel teased one afternoon. I smiled. Turns out, armor doesn't have to be hard to work. A year passed quickly. On the anniversary of Luis's passing, the 3 of us visited his grave together. The cemetery was quiet. The grass freshly trimmed. Soft lavender clovers bloomed behind his headstone. I brought a bottle of his favorite cold brew beer. Olivia carried a hand-drawn portrait of our family. Dan had written a letter, riddled with spelling errors and full of joy. Dear Daddy, he read aloud. We're doing great now. Mom says she's a superhero and I agree. One day I'll be just like you and protect our family too. I looked at that gray stone and didn't feel a sting, only a calm, steady peace. I stepped forward and set the beer down gently. Luis, I said, I did it. The kids are doing great. And I'm slowly becoming okay too. I finally realized I was never broken to begin with. I stood and reached for my children's hands. We stood in the sunlight, our shadows overlapping, like a family portrait finally ready to be taken. As we walked down the hill, Dan suddenly asked, Mom, if you ever want to meet someone again, would you start dating? I laughed, not rushing to answer. Maybe, I said. But next time I'll take it slow. And I'll definitely ask you too what you think. He nodded seriously. Well, we'd have to approve first. I burst out laughing. Olivia did too. We walked down the slope together. Behind us, the wind moved through the trees. Ahead, the street glistened like it had just been rinsed in spring. And I knew my life would never be the same. It would no longer revolve around a man. No longer bend to fit someone else's idea of complete. I had finally learned to move forward. In my own name. With my children at my side. And all of us, together walking ahead.